Good morning. Today we're going to be talking about the characteristics of gifted learners. And my name is Jenny Varnum, and I'm a third grade teacher at Bolivia Elementary School. Gifted students represent a vital resource that has unlimited potential. We need to make sure that these exceptional young people have the support and services they need to be successful. And that's a quote by Chuck Grassley. And ultimately, that's what it comes down to is we want to help all of our students be successful. But today's presentation is going to focus specifically on helping our gifted students be successful. But in order to do that, we have to be able to recognize those gifted learners and the characteristics that they have. Gifted learners, how they learn. It only takes gifted children 1 to 2 repetitions to learn compared to 7 to 8 repetitions for non-gifted learners. Gifted learners can be twice exceptional learners, which means they can be really gifted in one area and struggle in another, perhaps have an IEP for a learning disability. Gifted learners have unique interests and strengths. Here's a case study. Student A knows all of the countries of the world and their corresponding capitals. He sometimes chooses to interrupt whole group or small group instruction with bits of trivia about these countries or perhaps phrases in another language. This student is highly motivated to learn about geography and history, particularly as it pertains to Russia and world wars. We can use this as a strength by finding out what each student is interested in with an interest inventory, business card activity, and many others, and give students as much choice as possible when it comes to their learning. What makes a child gifted and talented may not always be good grades in school, but a different way of looking at the world and learning. Chuck Grassley. Gifted learners, just like every other child, have social and emotional needs. Gifted students may feel isolated or lonely at times and may experience a more extreme version of this than the non gifted learner. Gifted students often experience a need to do things perfectly and have a fear of failure. Gifted students can experience the range of emotions almost simultaneously. Students need to be reassured that nothing is wrong with them. One of the things that gifted learners often struggle with is making sure that they do everything right 100% of the time. As adults, we know that that is not a realistic expectation, but gifted learners, particularly at the elementary level, have not yet learned that. So we need to come alongside them and support them, encourage them, nurture them, and let them know that there is nothing wrong with them. Gifted learners can present challenges just like any other student, though their challenges may look a little different. There can be both positive and negative manifestations of characteristics of gifted learners. Case study. Student B has a seemingly unending list of questions. However, an abundance of questions is characteristic of gifted students. As teachers, we need to think about how we can turn the seemingly negative challenge, the unending list of questions, into something positive. How can we help that student to ask their questions to get the answers they need without disrupting the whole class or small group learning? Confucius said, "He who learns but does not think is lost. He who thinks but does not learn is in great danger." Gifted learners, what do they need? Gifted students need teachers to meet not only their academic needs, but as previously discussed, their social emotional needs. Use your time wisely with these students. Morning meetings, lunchtime, time lining up, any time that you can get to know them and let them know that you genuinely care about them as people and what they care about. Gifted students need to learn to become creative and critical thinkers. There is no doubt that gifted students are extremely intelligent, but they may struggle with the life skills of thinking creative and critically. They may struggle with common sense issues, and you may have to be a little more patient with them as you come alongside them and help them learn. Gifted students need to make real world connections. Gifted students want to know, how is what I'm learning going to be applicable in the real world? Help them make those connections. Gifted students need to engage in and take ownership of their learning, to help them become lifelong learners. Theoretically, you only have that gifted student in your classroom for 1, maybe 2 years if you loop up with your class. Or if you're in a high school or middle school setting and you teach the gifted students at most 3 to 4 years, you aren't going to be there for a lifetime unless it's your own child. You have to help that student learn how to learn and how to want to learn as he makes these connections. As educators, we have to change our thinking about gifted learners. Gifted students do not function at a high level all the time in all areas. Likewise, we as teachers do not. We need to recognize this in our gifted students. Teachers sometimes hold AIG or gifted students to higher expectations that may be unrealistic at times. We may expect when we're teaching a science lesson that our gifted students will take the pretest and already have mastered the content so that we can move on to something else. But perhaps that particular gifted student is gifted in reading, but not in scientific concepts. And perhaps that student needs to start where everyone else is starting with that science lesson. Gifted learners are still students that need to be not only challenged, but also nurtured and encouraged. We talked about this in the social emotional section. Our gifted students are still children or teenagers or young adults, depending on the grade level that we're teaching. We have to find out who they are, what they need, and what they care about so that we can continue to nurture them and encourage them along their educational journey. We still need to challenge them and provide rigorous content, but we also need to nurture and encourage them as people. Think back to the teachers that you've had, whether you were in gifted education or not. Did they nurture and encourage you, or did they simply provide the academic content? We need both to help our gifted learners be successful. Robert Frost said, "I'm not a teacher, but an awakener." And that's who we are as educators. Our job is to awaken in our students their desire to be lifelong learners. We want them to find what they are passionate about and become good citizens, and not just good students, but ultimately young adults and adults who love to learn. So, what can we do to make those connections with our students? The first step is by identifying the characteristics of gifted learners. We will ultimately provide assessments that will help us identify which learners are gifted. But as you get to know students, you will be able to recognize those characteristics early on. Teaching third grade this year has been such a wonderful experience because in third grade, learners are not yet identified as gifted learners at the beginning of the year. So at the beginning of the year, I looked at all of my M-Class scores since I'm primarily the reading teacher, and I looked at which students might benefit from our nurturing program, which is done once a week with 2 of our enhancement teachers. This is for students that we recognize are high achieving students and may perhaps be later identified as gifted learners. It was amazing to me that from both of my reading classes, I was able to identify these learners the very first week of school. These same learners who attended nurturing are the same gifted learners who have qualified for the gifted program through their COGAT scores and other pathways. What a blessing it was to be able to look at this data and then begin to look for characteristics of gifted learners in each of these students. And now I'm able to help them transition to fourth grade to be successful. I hope this presentation has been helpful to you as you have learned some of the characteristics of gifted learners that we as teachers are supposed to look for. And I hope that will help you in not only helping your students learn, but helping you become a better teacher.